Well, look, again, it's a real pleasure to meet you, Marley. I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat. Obviously, as we've established, we're movie fans, and I love talking to filmmakers about work that I really appreciate. And I watched PROCLIVITAS last night, and I loved it. I thought it was a really. I'm a horror
Oh,
guy. Like I love
yeah.
this is my genre. It's one I love, but I love this space we're in Australian filmmaking at the moment, where we are using the horror genre to tell really intimate stories. And that's kind of what I want to start with this view, because I think horror is such a great vessel to explore themes like grief and the way Claire is sort of going through it in the film. So I'm curious to know when you sort of found out genre filmmaking was a great vessel to be able to tell these more human stories.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of horror. Even when I was too young, I remember my favorite film as a kid was Poltergeist, which
Yes.
was probably like looking back a bit more gateway horror, even though there's some real scary moments in
It's
there.
creepy. No, it's
Um,
creepy for sure.
I know, but it's done with that kind of Steven Spielberg like wonderment about it as well.
Totally.
Um, so I was always just a massivest fan. Like grew up with Aliens and Predator and all those kind of franchises. And when I started working in the industry, I started off as an actor and I was immediately pigeonholed into comedy. And
Right.
I love comedy as well, but I started um, moving into that as a writer and director as well. So when it came towards making my first feature, like I was prepping for the last few years, looking towards what was the most feasible path for me, it actually came back around to horror. And I was like,
Interesting.
okay, like there's a beautiful history in our country of female-led horror. With Jennifer
Absolutely.
Kent and Natalie Erica James, and there's so many more, like coming out right now. Like I was just at South by Southwest, and there was an extraordinary amount of female filmmakers, Australian female filmmakers there. So it's very exciting.
It's exciting for audiences as well, because we are getting stories told through perspectives that have not, like you said, have not just been voices in film for a long time. And with the horror genre, I'm always intrigued to find out the process of how to scare people. There is tried and tested methods, because horror is a genre that's been around forever, but there's also, I'm assuming, the ways that you want to put your unique spin on that as well, whether it's tried and tested methods or finding new ways to scare people. And I'm curious to know what that process was like for you, and whether that started in a scripting phase or that was when you were on set. What was your sort of horror sensibility like when making this film?
Yeah, like I think when I look back at what's always scared me, um, like I remember as a child with the poltergeist example, the thought of being taken from my parents was so scary
Right.
to
Yeah.
me. Like I thought that was just yeah.
Yeah.
And
For sure.
I guess that, it's such a great way in, and the most effective horror comes from the psychological, I find. And then it's about, you know, your technique in terms of building those scares, both um, in what you envision when you write and go into production, but mostly the horror. So in the editing as well.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the edit, and it's almost very similar to comedy in the way that you really have to edit towards this rhythm that you're feeling. And it
Yes.
comes down to with both a laugh and a scare, like, okay, we need a few more frames, a little bit more frames. Okay, we're back, we've gone one frame too many, take it back. And
Yeah.
there's the jump or the laugh.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that. I got to talk to the Cairns brothers a few years ago, who did Late Night with the Devil. And I asked them a
Yeah.
similar question, because I was like, that movie's quite funny actually
Mm-hmm.
as well. And they're like, it's interesting. We don't see a difference, because we're still just trying to elicit a reaction out of the audience.
Yes.
Both of them are just trying in ways to try and get reaction. So it's interesting that you say that it comes down
Yeah,
into the edit.
absolutely.
And as well, obviously, you mentioned the psychological horror aspect of it, and within the film, we are sort of seeing this psychological descent of Claire. A lot has happened in her life, and a lot is happening to her throughout the film. And and the emotional investment I have, it's into Claire as a character. I don't think works without Rose and what she sort of brings to the character. So I'm curious to
She's
know,
so good.
she's
Yeah.
incredible, truly incredible. I'm then curious to know sort of what that collaboration was like and how the character of Claire evolved from sort of what you had on the page to when Rose got involved and how she sort of evolved throughout the film.
Yeah, I it was interesting because Rose came into it um later in the process,
Right.
but luckily we were able to have a full week of rehearsal with me and all the actors. So that was she's in Sydney, but she's from Fremantle originally. She kind of flew over to WA, jumped into the world and just asking a billion questions about her character. And it was interesting for me because, like so many of my lead characters, I take a facet of myself that I know so well. So I know I'm going to authentically be able to create this journey for the character, and it's going to be real and not just forced in place. And
Mm,
so what comes with that is a lot of it I'm not aware that I'm doing. It just feels right to me. So
right.
she's asking me a lot of questions, and I'm realizing how much of the character anxiety is driving the character as well.
Mm,
And that was once like that was Rose like digging away at that. She's like, okay, I get it. And this is why she has to move when the pressure becomes too much. And like
yes.
some of the sequences where she's dancing just to get that nervous energy out.
Yeah, yeah.
But like honestly, I feel like Rose stepped in and just owned that character. I was so lucky to have her because you cast and you audition or you know an actor's work and you make an offer, but it's really hard to know if you made the right choice until the cameras start rolling. And I
Mm.
remember that first day with both Rose and George going, oh, this is so good. Like the chemistry was just palpable. It popped off the screen then.
And they are incredible together. And what I do love about Claire and Jerry's relationship is
Mm,
that you provide contextual clues throughout the film about their past. And obviously, I don't want to
mm,
spoil too much about what happens in sort of the event that does happen in their past, but I'm always curious from a screenwriting point of view how you decide when to give the audience that sort of information and at what sort of beats do you play around with the film to kind of bring us on the adventure and bring us on, I guess, the relationship to start with, and then decide when the audience should know something that is
mm.
important. Is that something that you sort of played around with a lot during the screenwriting process?
Yeah, there's when you're plotting it out, I I have an idea of when I think those major beats are going to take place. And then
Right.
in the writing, I tend to overwrite and make
Awesome.
things a little bit more explicit on the page in dialogue and in action because really just when you're selling the document of a script, it doesn't come with any of those visuals that is the language of cinema.
Right.
You're trying to create that, you're trying to fill in the blanks that all the technicians that work on your film and the actors are going to bring. So as soon as we got the funding together and the initial conversation with the actors took place, that's when I began to pull back and pull back and pull out.
Interesting.
And it there was conversations with the actors as well about like what do you think you don't need, um
Right.
or and then again when we get into the edit it's like we pulled so much more out in the edit because we're like these actors are doing it, it does not need to be said.
Yeah.
And with your point about some of the reveals, but I remember now because it was such a crazy process. Like we did jigsaw things a little bit to see if this would be more effective or this was better. Oftentimes we ended up the way we originally had it, but we learned something by doing that.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like writing the story all over again in the edit, which I love. It's one of my favorite parts of the process.
I do hear often that filmmakers do say the film is made three times when you write it, when you film it, and then when you edit it. And it's kind of interesting to see the three different versions that do come out
Yeah.
of that. It feels like a very instinctual thing too. I think it's like an instinct filmmakers have when it comes to playing around in that jigsaw as well. And I think it's that's why I love it's so fascinating to talk about. the process. And you've mentioned sort of the technical aspects and the people who have worked on the film. I'm sure it's been brought up to you before. The sound design of this film is remarkable. It is truly phenomenal. Right from the opening sounds of the movie, I was like, oh, okay, this is a movie that's going to be, I guess, lack of a better phrase, like fucking with me audibly. Like it was definitely in that way. But I'm curious to know how much the sound design was embedded in the script, and then how much that evolved then in that post production process, and sort of how it elevated when the sound design team kind of got to like run rampant with this design.
Yeah, I feel so lucky with the sound design team that we had.
Mm.
Um, it they I cannot tell you the difference between before we had the sound design and after. It's like, oh my God, we have a real film now,
Wow.
finally. It They did such an incredible job. Their envelope in Perth, Josh, Ned, and Julian, they they were so excited to take this on and sink their teeth into it, and they were already coming with all these incredible ideas. In terms of my direction, I with the sound, I had more general, like this needs to feel like this here, and this needs to build up to a larger sound here. Um, I wanted to create something because you would know as well, having watched so many horrors, there's some that stick really close to this sound in score and their soundscape that are
Totally.
almost like carbon copies of each other.
Yeah.
So I was looking for, and this was with all my crew, I asked everyone to take risks and try out ideas. And, sometimes it didn't work, but most of the time they did. And when the sound guys got to it, I remember Julian in particular, who had just started working with him. He had done the sound design on Bird Eater, another Australian.
I love
He
that
was part
movie.
of that
Yeah.
team. Yeah. And he just had this idea of this animal inspired um, creature sound. And it's so funny when you look at the soundboard, there's like 152 different layers of things that he put in there to
Oh my
create
God.
that sound of the monster.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
152 like, and
Yeah.
it lends so much to that. The animalistic sound of it lends so much to the blend of reality and the supernatural that does happen in this film. And I think that's why it's so creepy and off-putting, because you don't know what is real when it is real, and what is happening within around Claire and in her head. And I'm curious to know sort of, the when I guess it's going back to that instinctual filmmaking feeling. When do you know something is right, especially when it comes to blending reality and the supernatural and making it believable within the world of the film? Was that something as well that was sort of a tinkering process within the edit, or was that something you were quite
Yeah,
confident in the story?
I think that's something I naturally gravitate to in all my projects, whether
Hmm,
it's uh comedy drama, horror drama.
right.
I really love when you can move seamlessly between bonkers and gut punch heart reality,
Totally.
and do it in a way that you're you understand there's a fantasy element to it,
Mm,
but you are suddenly, and so you go along with it, and then you suddenly realize what the core of it's going on, and you're like, oh shit.
yes. They're very much in
So
this film too. Yes, yeah, very much so.
yeah, I'm always trying to, because it's, I know I don't always succeed, but it's something that I love, and I feel like I will continue doing and refining, and it's what I love to watch as well. Like
Yeah.
it's like the classic is that series Fleabag, which is so heightened.
Yes.
But when you realize what that show is about, it's devastating.
Yeah. It
I
rips your
love
heart
it.
out. Well, I would like to,
Yeah.
I will say that I think you succeeded with that feeling in this film. Absolutely,
Oh, thank you so much.
because
Oh, I appreciate that,
when
Nick.
the emotional push does come to shove, it kind of hits like a freight train. So I think you balance those well. I'd love to also sort of ask about making this in WA as well, and I'm
Yeah.
curious to know sort of where Western Australia and the setting of the film sort of sits within the world of the film itself. What did sort of Western Australia bring to this project, and sort of what did you sort of meld to make this feel sort of like a film that does come out of
Mm.
WA?
It was interesting because me and my producer Kate, we had these discussions very early on before we'd even completed financing
Mm,
about like what we wanted this film to feel like in terms of where it would sit in
right,
the international landscape of films.
of course, yeah.
And we wanted the film to a degree to feel like it could be in Middle America, it could be in Eastern Europe, it could be in the UK. We I wanted the specificity of Australian Anna in there.
Mm,
Um, I think for us, we were just trusting that the elements we were bringing, like, the people we cast in it, would bring enough Australian and West Australian feel to it that we could fudge little other areas to infuse a more international feel to
sure.
it,
It,
if that
it,
makes
it
sense.
no, it absolutely does because it's
Yeah.
something I noticed, and of course, like when I'm prepping for interviews like this, I do look at things like letterbox reviews and stuff, and just to see what people are saying, and there is a common
Yeah.
consensus that this does feel it's always it's it. I'm hoping we come out of this as the Australian film industry, but it's like, oh, you wouldn't think this was made in Australia, and I feel like that's what we've been doing for like the last decade, especially in the horror space.
Yeah.
We've been making films that feel larger than we kind of feel like they should be, and I think that's incredible. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome, and I appreciate it as someone who's watching this film. Is that something that you kind of sense or have noticed as well over this past sort of, I guess, decade?
Yeah, I think I'm just so excited about genre and
Yeah,
specifically horror in Australia. Like, I think for some reason across the board, we're shooting above our weight in this particular genre.
totally. Yeah,
It seems to be a more trusted genre in terms of the funders and the freedom to take creative risks. Because I mean, this is my theory. I suspect
sure.
there's um, like a lot of people in these positions to give you money or to give you the green light may not all be horror fans, but they know it makes money.
So yeah,
So there's less inclination to micromanage every creative choice because they're like, okay, I don't really know what they're doing, so just maybe just let them do it. And because horror is so broad, you can't. There's no formula for one winning. Whereas you got a rom com, you know that this beat needs to be
yeah,
here, this beat needs to be. You got a coming of age, you know this has to happen.
yeah.
Um, so just the freedom that you get with horror filmmaking is incredible.
I feel like if you guys keep getting to let loose like this, we're gonna be eaten well as horror fans like this, and I think I'm excited for the future of it. I'll close out on this, Miley, and obviously,
Yeah.
looking at things like your IMDb and stuff. Like I know there's many projects that you've been working on and have worked on, and I'm always curious to ask filmmakers what has been one consistent thing, a lesson learned, or something you did on those earlier projects that has stayed consistent that you still did on Proclivitas. Something that was, a fundamental thing that you learned that was something that got you through the making of this film as well.
Hmm. It's interesting because the first thing that popped into my head was in terms of um the create not the creative, the actual working environment, the actual production side
Sure.
of things. And I guess the lessons that I've learned over and over again is about treating people, crew well. Um, not putting money above all, which is hard to do when money is stretched so thin and a production is pulled together for only a brief few months before it's like disbanded because it's not an organization that has to keep running. Um, but I've been on productions that have had a very toxic working environment, and I've been on productions that have been, you've just felt so valued, and I feel like I've done my best work.
Mm.
So that's a discussion me and Kate took forward, as well as
Yeah.
like, how do we create an environment that's putting people first, because it is just a film at the end of the day.
Shit.
um and yeah, that's, I think that's the thing that's consistently across the board with productions I've been on.
Yeah. And I think we see that on screen as audience members. Like I think having spoken to so many filmmakers, I know how much it takes a village to make a film. And you've spoken about all the
Mm.
technical people behind the scenes who make this work. If you don't foster the environment for them to have that same creativity you've had, then we don't get cool shit to watch. And that's unfortunate. But this is not the case
Yeah.
with PROCLIVITAS. It is cool shit at the end of the day. So, like
Thank
I
you,
said,
Nick.
no, you're welcome. I appreciate your time. I really did enjoy this film. I love talking to filmmakers about horror, and this was really fun. So, thank you so much for taking the time, Molly. I really appreciate it, and I hope we get to do it
Oh,
again for
thank you.
whatever
Appreciate it.
whatever you got coming up next. I hope we
Yes,
get to do it again.
please. I would love that. Absolutely. Happy movie watching.